Evening, everybody. Another splendid day in the shop. About a week or so ago, I picked up this Ridgid 14-inch bandsaw. Got it for what I thought was a pretty good deal, but as you can see here, the guide bearings were kind of crusty, so I decided to replace those. While I was at it, I figured I might as well go ahead and replace all the bearings since they're fairly easily available on the internet. These saws, although they're marketed by Ridgid and sold by Home Depot, the pretty much no unique parts other than maybe the stickers. So we'll start by carefully removing the bandsaw blade, set it aside. I went ahead and took this front door completely off just because it doesn't open all the way and it gets in the way of the video. You wouldn't need to do this at home unless you were videoing it. So take that off, get it out of the way. I think there was 3 or 4 screws on the side. The table, just drop the 2 nuts on the bottom. The whole table will lift off. It is kind of heavy, so don't drop it on your toe. Of course, it is cast steel, so they are prone to crack if you drop one of them. So don't do that. These are the bearings that I'm going to replace. There's 2 guide bearings. There's 2 bearings on the top wheel, 2 bearings on the bottom wheel. The top wheel is held on by one 19mm nut. This is a standard thread nut, and crack it, take it off, set it aside. The bottom wheel, however, is a reverse thread or a left-hand thread 12mm head bolt. One of the problems with this one was whoever had it before apparently didn't realize it was reverse threaded. Trying to take that off, they chewed it up pretty bad trying to over tighten it. So those are reverse thread or left hand thread. So make sure that you pay attention when you're taking that bottom one off. The bearings that you'll need for this saw, you'll need 2 6200 ZZ. Those are the guide bearings. You'll need 2 6202 RS. Those are the upper wheel bearings. And then you'll need 2 6204 RS. Those are the lower wheel bearings. These guide bearings are just held on with a simple Phillips head machine screw. Just back those out. Don't lose your screws. Set those aside. It looks like I'm talking to you in some of these videos. It's because I tried to do the audio in my shop, but the acoustics were just horrible, and then it started to rain. So once you get these the bearings off, it's obligatory that you have to blow on them. I'm not sure why I do that, but these were pretty chewed up and crunchy, so time for some new ones. The upper wheel just pulls right off. Those aren't pressed in or anything. Just pop them out. Usually the one will stay on the spindle. Take those off. You'll notice these are a little bit different. These are the RS, which is a rubber seal, versus the ZZ, which are steel shielded. That's the only difference. The lower wheel pops off. Make sure you don't lose the Woodruff key there that helps it spin. There's one of those on the front and on the back pulley. I just look at all of it. Now these will have to have a little help getting the lower shaft out, and you'll see that in just a second. Here you can see the part numbers for those. Those are the lower wheel bearings. We're going to go ahead and take the belt off the back so we can get that pulley out of the way. Set that aside. Do need an Allen key or Allen wrench. Loosen the set screw. The pulley should pull right out. Again, there's another key on here. It's a 5mm or 13/16 key. If you happen to lose it, costs you about $1. When I got this saw, it didn't have that key, which caused all sorts of problems. I do have another video up that will show how that happens. Next problem is to get these clips off. I call them Jesus clips because you're going to say probably more than Jesus trying to get these things off. Go ahead and order another one because you're either going to lose it or bend it trying to get it off. So those are 3/4 inch clips. Here I'm using a rubber mallet just to kind of tap this shaft out. Again, this is from the back. It'll slide out to the front, and the other bearing will stay fairly firm on there. I used my 3-jaw puller to get that bearing out. It didn't take a whole lot of effort, but it's better than trying to beat it out and beat on that shaft. So one thing you don't want to do is directly hit that shaft with anything, because you don't want to bend that, because that probably would be the hardest thing on this saw to replace. Once you get the bearing off and out of the way, I like to go ahead and use a little mineral spirits or some kind of solvent just to clean the shaft up, get it ready for the new bearing. So at this point you should have all of the old bearings loose and free. Like I said, these bearings are all easily available on the internet at all the likely sources. I think that I ordered all 6 of these bearings, and I think it was $17, and that was shipped and taxes and whatever other fees. So $17. You can probably find them cheaper. Like I say, these are pretty much Chinese commodity bearings, nothing special. I like to set all of the new bearings right beside the old bearings, kind of give them a once over, make sure that they're all the same size, make sure that the external diameters and the internal diameters are the same. I also like to put just a touch of 3-in-1 oil or some other light oil on these before I start installing the bearings. Here I'm using an old socket that closely matches that inner race on that bearing. You want to make sure that you're not driving on the bearing or on the seal itself, only on the inner bearing. So here I tap it down. Once you get it going, you have to hit it sort of hard to get it to seat all of the way, but just make sure that it seats all the way and you'll be good to go. This next trick I came up with because you're going to have to drive that inner bearing in with the shaft and the outer bearing in place. So I just drilled a little small divot in this board and clamped it to the saw. That way whenever I drive this inner bearing onto the shaft, it doesn't push it out through the back. Couple of options whenever it comes to driving this inner bearing. You can put a socket on there and beat it with a hammer, or what I like to do is just get a bit on my air chisel that doesn't go all the way through the socket, and just quick as this right here, that bearing is in and seated, and nothing pushes out the back. Once you get both of the shaft bearings installed, you can go ahead and remove the makeshift clamp and set it aside for your next big project. Give the shaft a couple of turns. Make sure that it's, you didn't booger anything up when you were driving those bearings in, and you're pretty much, it's all downhill now. It's just wash and repeat. Assembly is reverse a disassembly. The upper bearing, the inner bearing will slide on. Then you'll add your wheel and the outer bearing, and then put the nut on, kind of snug it down. Nothing to it. Like I said earlier, these are not really pressed in. They're just barely friction fit in there. The nut again is that's a regular threaded nut. It's not reverse threaded. So put it on. It's on my saw. It's a 19 millimeter wrench to tighten it up. You just have to snug it up. You don't have to really torque it down. I like to keep this old paintbrush around just to get all of the dirt and the dust. And a lot of people don't realize it, but that sawdust on there will affect the balance of your wheels. So the more that you can get off, it doesn't take much to throw one of these wheels out of balance. Again, these are made by the low bidder in China, so they're not exactly perfectly balanced anyway. So once you get everything back together and get that nut snug down, you have to give it a spin. That's part of the rules. Now we'll move on to getting the bottom wheel on. The only trick here is make sure you get all the dust off of inside and out. Slide it on. Make sure that you put that key back in, otherwise the shaft will spin in the pulley, and you're going to be searching for another pulley. Now, if you or a previous owner of this saw have chewed up this lower wheel head, it's not a problem. It's an M8 by 1.25 by 20 millimeter bolt. You'll have a hard time finding those in a quantity of one, but what you can use is a DeWalt miter saw arbor bolt. This is the bolt that holds the miter saw blade in place. Those are readily available. I think I ordered this one off of Amazon. I think I got 2 of them for about $7, so about $3.50 a piece. You cannot find those at Lowe's, Home Depot. Even I checked my local Fastenal. But once you get that on, like I said, the lower wheel shaft and bolt are reverse threaded. That shaft spins with the wheel, so just get it started and give the wheel a spin, snug it up, and we are in the home stretch now. The guide bearings, simply put them on, tighten the screw. Not a problem. You will have to readjust these guide bearings after this is all complete. The lower guide bearing, exact same as the top. Slide it in, tighten that screw down, and you're good to go. Once you get the guide bearings all cinched up, go ahead and put the pulley back on the back. Again, don't lose the key to that. Put it on. One of the things you do need to do is make sure that you check to make sure that your pulleys are mostly parallel. They don't have to be perfect, but anytime you're off parallel with that, it'll cause a lot of heat and a lot of excess wear on your belt, and just not good for it. So make sure they line up. Once you do that, tighten up that Allen head set screw and get your belt back on, and we're almost ready to cut. I find it easiest when you're putting this belt on, put it on the lower, the small motor side pulley, and then just roll it over the big one. Now we're going to go ahead and carefully reinstall the blade, get it all lined up. What I'm doing there is tensioning it. There is a gauge on the back, and then once you get it on, you want to make sure that it's tracking right. You have to be extra careful when you do this, because I wasn't. A bandsaw blade will cut human flesh. Before you fire this thing up for the first time, I do recommend putting on some protection, as in eye protection. Last thing you want is for something to come flying off here and catch you right in one of the lookers. You only get 2 and they don't grow back, so take care of them, especially when you're a shade tree mechanic fixing these things up. Table goes back on easy peasy. Slide it on, put the nuts back on the bottom. After that, we'll get the trunnion nuts back on, tightened up. Then we'll get the door replaced. Again, you don't need to take that lower door off. It just made it easier to video with it out of the way. The door does not swing all the way open, but it'll swing open enough to let you get in there and get done what needed. And of course, that's going to spend most of its life closed anyway. A couple screws in the back. I did notice that the protractor, or the angle measurement guide there, somebody installed it. They put it on the wrong side of the table. It should go on the inside, which explains why my little pointer indicator never would hit it. But there you go. Through the magic of editing, it was instantaneously fixed. Now, I made a couple of test cuts with this. This saw is not a, it's not a $2,000 saw. Um, I've now got about 120 bucks in it. But it does cut, and that's all I really wanted it for. If you're looking for a saw that you can put a stack of nickels on and they won't fall over, this probably ain't it. But if you want a saw that you can pick up on the cheap, put a couple, $20-25 in it, maybe 40 bucks if you want to put some new urethane tires on it. It cuts. Again, this blade, I had to beat the rust off of it. When I purchased the saw off of, he did include, I think there's 4 or 5 brand new blades still in the package. I know there was a 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, and a 1/2 inch resaw blade. Like I said, this is not a showcase, professional type bandsaw, but I think if you can get into it for a good price, I think you can make a decent addition to your shop. The forums tend to beat up on these saws because they're not great, they're out of balance. I think it's in line with any of the other saws that were imported from China that look like this, because I think most of them probably came off the same assembly line. And like I said, nothing on this saw other than probably the Ridgid nameplate is unique to this saw. The parts are out there. You may have to do a little research to figure out what you need and what you got, but they're definitely doable. You can find the parts and you can replace them yourself. So there you go. Have a good one.